motives on the part of one person that makes another person less effective. Okay, so the difference of opinions, or it can be the self-interest or the struggle that arises out of goal-directed behavior, and it can be a disagreement between two or more individuals, which can be leading to a conflict. So we have the nature of conflict. When we are talking, we have the traditional view, which is from 1930 to 1940. So it was viewed negatively and discussed with such terms as violence, destruction, and irrationality to reinforce its negative connotation. So, according to the traditional view, conflict was always termed as negatively. And 1940 to 70, we have the human relations view. In the human relations view or school of thought, conflict is accepted. It believes that conflict may benefit a group's performance, and dispute happens from time to time, and it is not wise to put such much effort into avoiding or preventing the conflict. And we have from 1970s the interactionist view. And with passage of time, the viewpoint on conflict has undergone tremendous change. And this view, popularized by Drew and Lutz, suggests that conflict encourages conflict on the grounds that a harmonious, peaceful, tranquil, and cooperative group is prone to becoming static, apathetic, and unresponsive to needs for change and innovation. So when we are talking about conflict under interactionist view, people can seldom wall off their feelings into categories of task or relationship disagreements. So task conflicts sometimes escalate into relationship conflicts. Now, what are the types of conflicts? We have the functional view of organizational conflict. It sees conflict as a productive force, which can stimulate members of the organization to increase their knowledge and skills and their contribution to the organizational innovation and productivity. And it supports the goals of the group and it improves the performance, and it is called as a constructive form of conflict. And here we see conflict encourages new thinking, and conflict will always raise questions. It will try to build the relationships, and conflict opens minds. I mean, you come out of your mind and you talk, okay? And it prevents stagnation. Conflict will always prevent stagnation. And then we have dysfunctional conflict. Now, the dysfunctional view of organizational conflict is embedded in the notion that organizations are created to achieve goals by creating structures that perfectly define job responsibilities, authorities, and other job functions. So there are conflicts that hinder group performance, and these are dysfunctional or destructive forms of conflict. So conflict is inevitable. You cannot avoid conflict, and it is desirable in organizations, and it should be handled effectively. So effectively in the sense, the conflict should not tear the relationships apart. And in fact, the conflict should encourage the exchange of ideas, information, and resources in the groups as well as in between the departments. So the dysfunctional conflict hinders and prevents organizational goals from being achieved. So such kind of conflict should be avoided. So what are the diagnosing functional or dysfunctional conflict? Managers find it very difficult in identifying whether a conflict is a functional conflict or dysfunctional. So they are given some criteria wherein you can identify uh, what kind of a conflict it can be. So if it is resources control or money, property, space, okay, and preferences and nonsenses, values, beliefs, and the nature of relationships between parties. So based on this, the conflict can be defined as functional or dysfunctional. And the other types of conflicts are extrinsic and intrinsic. So extrinsic conflict has psychological and emotional content, whereas intrinsic conflict consists of rational or intellectual contents. And then we have realistic and non-realistic. So what is a realistic? Realistic conflicts have rational, task, or goal-oriented confrontations, whereas non-realistic conflicts are in no way related to goals or tasks or of the groups of the organization. And we also have substantive and effective conflicts. Now, substantive conflicts are task-related conflicts, whereas effective conflicts are related to socio-emotional or interpersonal relations. Now, coming to the levels of conflict, you have intrapersonal conflict. Now, intrapersonal conflict occurs when an individual often involves in some form of goal conflict or cognitive conflict. Goal conflict exists for individuals when their behavior uh, will result in outcomes, and these are mutually exclusive or have compatible elements, that is both positive and negative outcomes. So here you can find approach conflict. It is a situation in which a person has a choice between two or more alternatives with positive outcomes. And then you have avoidance. Avoidance conflict is a situation where a person must choose between two or more alternatives and they will have negative outcomes. And then you have approach avoidance conflict. It is a situation in which a person has to decide whether to do something that had both positive and negative outcomes. And you have the interpersonal conflict. The interpersonal conflict involves two or more individuals and two or more managers competing for the same promotion, or it can be two executives maneuvering for a large share of corporate capital. Such can be the example. So it can be the personality differences, it can be the perceptions, or it can be between the clashes of values and interests, or it can be the sharing of the scarce resources, or it can be the power and status differences, anything it can be. And you have the intra-group conflict. A group experiencing intra-group conflict may eventually resolve it, allowing the group to reach a consensus. But if the group is not able to resolve the conflict and the group discussion, if it ends in disagreement, so this conflict within the groups is not a simple or a single phenomenon. It becomes intra-group conflict. It can be substantive conflict, or it can be the effective conflict. Substantive conflict refers to conflict based on the nature of the task, and whereas you have the effective conflict, which is of emotional responses, or it can be the group interpersonal relations. Intergroup conflict, it is an organization, is a collection of individuals and groups. So this situation and requirements demand the individual from various groups. So the success of the organization will always depend upon the harmonious relationship between the independent and interdependent groups. So this intergroup conflict in the organizations is inevitable. So here we have to try to find out the intergroup behaviors within an organization. Now, intra-organizational conflict, we have the vertical conflict. It refers to the conflict between the levels in an organization. So it can be the superior subordinate conflict, or it can be the horizontal conflict, where the conflict between the employees or departments on the same hierarchical level. And it can be the line and staff conflict. So you have the line members and the staff managers who have conflict. So the staff are the experts and the line people are the managers who actually execute it. So there is always a conflict between these two people or these two categories. And then we have the role conflict. It is the cluster of activities that others expect individuals to perform. And we have the inter-organizational conflicts. So these are the conflicts that arise between two or more organizations. So there can be numerous examples where you can observe the conflicts. And such kind of conflicts are generally dysfunctional. And managing intrapersonal and interpersonal conflicts through transactional analysis and Johari window. So what is transactional analysis? It aims at improving the communication and interpersonal relations between the individuals. And this is a proven method that helps two persons communicate and behave on the job. What do we say? In a more matured manner. wherein you have the understanding of each other's motives. And generally, these are complementary rather than being competitive, these are complementary. And the concept of transactional analysis is the way how people understand or individual understand their behavior in the organization. Now, what is Johari window? It helps in opening up the hidden area of the individuals through feedback, or it can be through critical appraisal. And this will in turn lead them to better communication and interpersonal relationship. So all these initiatives are not only important, but they are absolutely necessary to manage the transactional analysis behavior in the organization. When we are talking about the transactional analysis, so you need to understand the three ego states in the individual's personality. The first one would be the parent ego. So this in this ego state, an individual tends to behave more in the nature of a parent. So what does a parent do? It will be more like a dictating uh, the right and the wrong behavior, and it can be a nurturing parent or it can be a critical parent. So what does a nurturing parent do? He will try to understand and care about the people, whereas the critical parent will always try to identify and evaluate and be more judgmental. And then you have the adult ego. So this state evokes the behavior that could be described as logical, or we say reasonable, rational, and unemotional behavior. And this kind of an ego state will be taking the emotional content of their child ego state, and based on that, the behavior can be exhibited. And then you have the child ego. So this state is associated with the behaviors that appear when a person is responding emotionally, or we say encompassing the natural impulses and attitudes learned from child experiences. So there are several forms of child ego state. So there are basically two kinds of ego states, like happy child and destructive child. Now, what is the happy child? Behaving very happily, and destructive, as you know, it is more into the destructive nature rather than being happy. Okay, so these are the forms where the transactional analysis has been uh, explained. And in the Johari window, we have the first pane, the arena, where which contains that a person knows about himself, and also the group will know about himself. And there's a blind spot which contains the information that one does not know about oneself. And we have the pane 3, that is the hidden area. So what is the hidden area? So it contains the information that a person knows about oneself, but the other members or the other group doesn't know. And we have the fourth and the last pane, the unknown. And this is neither known by other people nor by the self. So by applying the Johari window, one person can understand based on the feedback and the communication provided by others, the hidden areas and the hidden zones, which will help him to perform or which will try to make him a better person. So we have the stages or the process of conflict. We have the stage one. It is the potential position or incompatibility state. And we have the stage one, where the structure in this context includes variables such as the size of the group, degree of specialization, and communication. It will be differing word, jargons, insufficient exchange of information. And we also have the personal variables, that is, it can be the personality and the emotion, the values, what an individual carries. And in the stage two, you have the cognition and personalization. And it is at that felt conflict level when individuals become emotionally involved, that they experience the anxiety, the tension, the frustration. Okay, all these are observed in stage two. And stage three, in the intention, where people's perceptions and the emotions and their overt behavior can be observed. So there are decisions to act in a given way. So many conflicts are escalated simply because of one party attributes the wrong intentions towards the other. It can be competing, collaborating, avoiding, accommodating, and compromising. These are the five conflict handling intentions which can be observed here. And coming to the fourth stage is the behavior. When people think of conflict situations, they tend to focus on stage four. That is, the conflict becomes visible. The behavior stage includes the statements or the actions and the reactions made by the conflicting parties. And then you have stage four, stage five, the outcomes. The action reaction interplay between the conflicting parties and the results and the consequences. These outcomes may be again functional or dysfunctional. So functional conflicts are constructive and dysfunctional conflicts are destructive. So what are the sources of conflict? It can be the internal sources. These are the sources or the factors which are inherent within the framework of an organization. And then you have the external sources. These are called outside the four walls of the organization. And you also have specialization. Employees tend to become specialists in a particular job. And it can be interdependence. That is, the possibility of a conflict usually has a tendency to increase the level of task interdependence. And you have authority relationships in many companies. There is an underlying tension between the managers and the employees. And this is because of the people with whom they handle, or it can be their roles and their expectations, or it can be the jurisdiction ambiguities. I mean, where they don't know which area or which group or which set belongs, or which has to be controlled or uh, left. And then coming to the group conflict, intergroup behavior occurs whenever individuals belonging to one group interact collectively or individually with another group, and there's a conflict between them. So what can be the reason? It can be the differentiation. So differentiation it can be relating to the task, or it can be the split up of the functions, or it can be of the specialization, or it can be the division of goods and services between various departments, or it can be the task relationships where the organization tasks are interrelated, and if one group is performing, that is affected by another group, or it can be the scarcity of resources where the two groups have to share the resources amongst them. Because of the scarcity, the conflict might arise. And what does the conflict management or the resolution strategy say? First of all, you have to adopt yourself to manage a conflict. That is, you have to identify the conflict elements or the emotions, and then transformation, changing the orientation of the conflict, and then solution. You need to identify a solution. Okay. So here you have the conflict resolution techniques. The first and foremost is the problem solving. Have face-to-face meeting and try to solve the problem, or superordinate goals, wherein you try to create a shared goal that cannot be attained without the cooperation of the conflicting parties. Or it can be the expansion of the resources. When a conflict is caused by the scarcity of the resources, then maybe you have to, go beyond a conflict and try to see that both the parties are winning. It should be a win-win solution for both the parties. Or it can be avoidance, where you withdraw yourself or suppress the conflict. Or it can be a smoothing technique, wherein the playing down differences while focusing or emphasizing more on the common interests between the conflicting parties. It can be a compromise, or it can be altering the human variable, or it can be altering the structural variables. So any of these can be the techniques which can be followed by the organization. And we have the preventing conflict techniques as well. So here, the goal structure. So the goal should be clearly defined, and the role and the contribution of each unit or department towards the organizational goal must be clearly identified and clearly expressed. And there should be a reward system, And there should be a proper trust and communication, and effective coordination will always reduce the conflict. So at the individual level, you can follow ignoring the conflict, or smoothing means covering up the conflict by appealing for the need of being or maintaining unity for the accomplishment of the organizational goal, or it can be a compromise. You try to balance where both of the parties have a win-win situation, or coercion. So you might force. Sometimes, I mean, you have the necessity of the other party, and where you cannot display the conflict outrightly, then it is better. A kind of a coercion will be applied there, a force, wherein the help will be stopped. For example, you are relying on some person for some advice, or for some maybe techniques to complete your task. The moment there's a conflict, the coercion will be applied, wherein the force, if you are not resolving the information, or whatever the delegation of the work, or whatever the help the other party is doing, will not be doing it uh, if the conflict is not resolved. Maybe that can be applied as a technique, or it can be a problem solving approach. And at the group level, generally you follow a third party negotiation, where you try to have a mediator or an arbitrator, or it can be a conciliator, or it can be a negotiator. By whatever name you call, these are the third party people who are involved in the conflict negotiation. Okay, so generally the third party will be a neutral party, and they try to listen to both the parties, their versions of the conflict, and they try to come and give a solution which will be a compromising situation for both the parties. And it can be a win-lose situation. What is this win-lose situation for both the parties? I win something, I have to lose something. Similarly, the other party will also have to win something and lose something. So that is what the process of negotiation means. So whenever we are talking about the negotiation, we have two important strategies, that is the distributive bargaining and integrative bargaining. So what is distributive bargaining? It assumes a fixed pie and focuses on how to get the biggest share or slice of the pie. So the conflict management strategies of compromising, forcing, accommodating, and avoiding, okay, all these tend to be associated with this distributive negotiation strategy. And what is integrative bargaining? It will try to follow an assumption that one or more of the possible settlements can create a win-win solution. And we have also the positional bargaining. It is very much closely related to distributive bargaining, and it is commonly used as positional bargaining approach, based on the position, based on the power what a person holds. The bargaining power will be generally resting. And then you have the contemporary negotiation approaches, where you have the low risk negotiation techniques, or it can be the high risk negotiation technique. So either of the one can be applied whenever you are applying the negotiations in the organizations. And then we have the last block, stress management and organizational dynamics, where we are going to learn about stress management, organizational culture and climate, organizational change, and contemporary issues in organizational behavior. So what is stress? It can be whenever we are talking about the people, people experience stress both in their private life as well as at workplace. And basically, when we are talking about stress, it is something which is unavoidable, and where every person has to work under stress, under pressure. And it all depends upon the person, how he is able to handle the stress. And generally, when we are talking about stress from the organizational context, it is always discussed as negative. Okay, and it is negative, or it is necessarily bad, and it will definitely affect the person's performance. That is how the stress is examined in the organizational context. So, what is stress? Stress is an adaptive response to an external situation, and this will always result in physical, psychological, or behavioral deviations for organizational participants. And the more you have to understand is stress is inevitable. So, and it all depends upon how a person handles stress. So, when we are talking about the nature of the stress, stress is a reaction to a situation or an event. Stress can be impacted by individual differences. Stress creates excessive psychological or it can be the physical demands because only one special or unusual situation will try to produce the stress. And stress is not simply anxiety, because as anxiety operates on emotional or what do we say, psychological spheres, whereas stress will be operating on physiological sphere as well. And stress is not simply nervous tension like anxiety. Nervous tension may result from stress, but the two are not the same. And stress is not necessarily something bad or damaging. Uh, I mean, everybody will be facing stress. As I already said, it is how a person handles stress is more important. So, what is physiological basis of stress? It is stimulus-based definition of stress. Stress is understood as how a person appraises or judges demanding or threatening events. So these are called as stressors. And response-based definition says that the physiological response that occurs when faced with demanding or threatening situations. And then we also have physiological mechanism of stress. And this is defined under three stages. Alarm reaction. So the stress generates a fight or flight reaction, resistance. The body begins to adapt to continuing stress. And the last would be the exhaustion. A person's adaptive energy is depleted as stress begins to take a physical toll. So these are the three stages of physiological reactions to the stress. And how do we try to relate these to the physiological changes, the reactions? It can be the sympathetic nervous system. So there is a trigger arousal, and because of which the stress levels will be increasing, and the body releases certain hormones, and they fight or flight responses to the stress. And you also have uh, the body, to what extent it can cope up with the stress, to what extent it is able to manage the stress. It varies from person to person. Physiological outcomes of stress, it can be a negative consequences on the body, or like it can be fatigue, or it can be reduced concentration, or it can be changes in skin texture, or it can be a loss of moisture, sorry, loss of moisture. And you have increase in blood glucose. So there's many outcomes of stress. So the consequences can be more or less similar. Again, this varies from person to person. And we have the burnout and distress. So stress is usually thought of in negative terms. It is thought to be caused by something bad. Okay. And this is a form of distress, what we are talking about. There is also a position, a pleasant side of stress, and this is caused by good things. Like, for example, a person is promoted, and he has to move from the present place of his residence or the present place to a different place. So that also involves stress, because it's a positive stress, what we have to say, because he's promoted, he's very happy. But the thing is, he has to leave his native place or the place of residence where he's residing for past many years. Now he has to move to a new place. So adjusting the kind of environment, what he has to face in the new place is a stress again. So, but this can be termed as a positive stress. And what is a burnout? It is a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion. And this is caused by excessive and prolonged stress. So it can be because of a person feeling emotionally drained, or he's unable to meet the constant demands from the organization, or it can be from the family, because of which the situation arises. And here we have the next one, distress. So what is a distress? There are two kinds of distress, that is acute stress, uh, or that which surfaces, it's quite intense and it disappears quickly, and chronic stress, which may not appear quite so intense, yet it seems to be prolonged, for the prolonged period of time. And you have eustress. It is a good stress. Any stressor that motivates an individual towards an optimal level of performance or health. It can be new stress. Any kind of information or sensory stimulus that is perceived as unimportant or inconsequential. And then you have a distress, the unfavorable or negative interpretation of an event, or it can be acute stress that is intense in nature but short in duration, or it can be chronic stress that is not as intense as acute stress but that lingers for a prolonged period of time. That is chronic stress. So stressors are not always limited to situations. It can be some external situation which is creating a problem, or it can be an internal event such as a feeling or a thought. Okay, these might also cause negative stress. And what are common internally caused sources of distress? It can be fear, or it can be repetition, repetitive thought patterns, or it can be worrying about future events, or it can be unrealistic or perfectionist expectations. So, all these are the internal caused sources of distress. And habitual behavior patterns, which generally lead to distress, include overscheduling or procrastination, or it can be failing to be assertive. So any of these patterns can lead to distress. Now, what are the sources of stress? It can be the environmental factors. Now, what can be the environmental factors? Uh, There are three basically main type of environmental uncertainties that can be the economic, political, and technological. So changes in the business cycle create economic uncertainties. And when the economy is contracting, or that is, for example, people become increasingly anxious, like about their job security because of the business cycles. What happens? You have a recession, and due to recession, most of the organization, they tend to they tend to close their businesses, where you can find that employees are leaving their job or they're losing their job. So this can be the reason for the job security. And this is the model which has been proposed by Stephen Robbins. So this is the potential sources, and these are the consequences, and based upon which every person will be experiencing stress. And what can be the organizational factors? Organizational factors can be studied both at micro level as well as at macro level. It can be the task demand relating to a person's job, or it can be a role demands relating to pressures which are placed on a person, or the person working at a particular role, or it can be the interpersonal demands or the pressures which are created by other employees. And you also have group stressors, wherein you lack cohesiveness. So, what is cohesiveness? It is togetherness. Whenever people are not sharing common interests in a group, that will lead to a stress. And lack of social support. I mean, where they are not finding, when naturally there's no cohesive group, you cannot have any social support from the members who are there in that particular group. And then you have the personal factors. What are the personal factors? It can be the personality patterns, or it can be the personal control over the emotions. It can be the psychological factors, or it can be the learned helplessness of the persons. These all can be the experiences what a person has while tending to the stress. And then what are the consequences of stress? You have physiological symptoms, you have psychological symptoms, and you have behavioral symptoms. These are the three major categories of consequences of stress. Now, what can be the physiological symptoms? It can be relating the link to the stress, like immune system problems. Where the person will be having lesser ability to fight illness and infection, or it can be the cardiovascular system problems, high blood pressure or heart diseases, or it can be gastrointestinal system problems, it can be diarrhea, or it can be constipation, or it can be headaches, tension headaches, or back pains, or body pains. Okay, so all these can be the physiological symptoms which can be associated to stress. And then we have the psychological symptoms. Psychological symptoms are due to high workloads, and this is generally related to high blood pressure or lower emotional well-being. Okay, and what do these jobs make? Multiple and conflicting demands, and basically these jobs will not have any clarity about the duties or about the authority and the responsibilities. Such jobs will generally increase the stress as well as the dissatisfaction. And the last one would be the behavioral symptoms. So, behavior related stress symptoms include reduction in productivity, absence, increased absenteeism and turnover. And you can also observe changes in eating habits, increased smoking or consumption of alcohol, sleep disorders. Okay, so you find such kind of behavioral symptoms which are basically due to stress. Coming to the next, behavioral and work related stress, it is the acronym is WRS, and it refers to when a person perceives the work environment in such a way that his or her reaction involves feelings of an inability to cope. So that is what is work related stress. The job demands something, and the person feels that he is not able to give what the job is asking him to do. Okay, so the imbalance between the job requirements and the job performance will relating to work related stress. And what can be the behavior which can be observed when people are working under pressure? So some people feel very threatened. Okay, other people behave aggressive, and other react to the same situation in quiet and calm. Okay, the feeling is unthreatened, and they show a relaxed behavior. And others who are highly aware of their moods report that they are not very stressed by the issue, and they actually enjoy the challenges which are given to them while performing the job. And there might be some other set who have very low tolerance of threats, so they find smaller or simpler demands made less threatening, and less feeling of stress. Mm. So the effects of stress can be categorized as mental, how the mind works; physical, how the body works; behavioral, the things we do; cognitive, the way think and concentrate. Now, what are the stress coping mechanics? Appraisal focused or problem focused and emotion focused coping strategies. Now, what is appraisal focused strategies? They attempt to modify the thought process associated with the stress. So, what do people do? They alter the way they think about a problem by approaching it differently, or maybe by changing, altering their goals and values. And problem focused strategies aim to deal with the cause of the problem or stressor And people try to change or eliminate the source of stress by researching the problem and also trying to learn the management skills to solve it. And emotion focused strategies, they address the feelings which are associated with the stressor. People modify the emotions that accompany the stress perception by releasing, distracting, or managing their mental state. So here we have adaptive versus maladaptive strategies. So adaptive are positive, maladaptive are negative. So positive coping strategies successfully diminish the amount of stress being experienced and they provide constructive feedback for the users. Whereas negative coping strategies might be successful at managing or abating the stress, but they result in dysfunctional and non-productive. And then we have individual and organizational strategies. Individual strategies to cope up the stress or to eliminate. We have the exercise. So people of all ages are walking, jogging, swimming, cycling, or playing tennis or something of that sort, which is an exercise which will actually try to combat stress. And then you have relaxation, where specific relaxation techniques can be used, like meditation, so on and so forth, which will try to reduce the stress. And then you have the behavioral self control, where you deliberately manage the antecedents and the consequences of one's behavior and you try to achieve self control. And you can also have the cognitive therapies and networking, time management, goal setting. So all these are certain examples where a person can actually manage the stress. And then you have the organizational strategies where you try to redesign the jobs while giving more responsibilities and more meaningful work, and also provide with the autonomy and provide continuous or increased feedback about the performance. And you also have employee involvement in decision making, which will actually boost their morale and try to involve themselves in the organizational decision, will in a way try to reduce the stress. And you have organizational communication, provision of sabbatical leave where employees need an occasional escape from the work. They should be provided with some kind of, there should be a provision for the sabbatical leaves where it can be from few weeks to few months, which will allow the employees to travel or pursue their personal projects and relax. And you should also have, organization should also have the wellness programs. On and off, maybe it can be planned according to the employees level or departments and the kind of stress they are taking, which will actually help to organize workshops wherein they can quit smoking, or it can be controlled use of alcohol or weight loss, eat better. So such kind of wellness programs should be organized. And then you have work family initiatives where you try to reorganize the or restructure the jobs and the job duties in such a way that they try to maintain the work-life balance. And you also have employee assistance programs, and they will try to help the employees to cope with the stress. So these are the strategies which help the organizations in coping up the stress. And then you have the organizational culture and climate. Now, what is organizational culture? So, as we notice frequently in workplaces, managers and employees equally talk more about their organizations. It can be the good, the bad, and the ugly side of an organization or of their organizations. And managers pretend, they might pretend that they are on the side of the owners of the business concern, but they also talk among themselves of the negative and also the positive shades of their organization. So, what is culture? Now, when we are talking about the definition of the culture, Culture provides the energy needed to function well by ensuring as it were a proper circulation of blood through all the organs. This is the definition given. So what does that mean? Organizational culture refers to the pattern of the beliefs, values, and learned ways of coping with experience that they have developed during the course of an organization's history. Okay, so this is what we say, the beliefs, the values, and all other learned ways of coping up with the experiences. And these are developed while the employees are working in the organization. So it can be the common things which actually demonstrate the components of the organization culture can be shared things. That is the way people dress, shared saying, let's go down to work, for example. Shared actions, that is the service oriented approach, or it can be the shared feelings where the hard work is not always rewarded here. Okay, so so these are the way the culture is shared. Okay, so nature of culture, it can be understood from the importance and its utility in the organizational context. So a healthy culture encourages the employees to stay motivated, loyal towards the organization, and it can be expressed in their communication. And employees try their level best to perform better than their fellow workers, and they try to earn recognition and appreciation. And no two organizations can have the same work culture. So, if the culture of an organization, which makes it different, distinct from other organizations, and the work culture gives an identity to the organization. And when we say in simple, an organization is known by its culture. So, what is formation of organizational culture? Every organization has a unique style of working, which is often called as its culture. Okay, the beliefs, the policies, the principles, the ideologies of an organization, they form the culture. And it first creates the culture and keeps forming and evolving in response to the external changes and internal restructuring of the organization. So here it can be the philosophy of the organization founders, the selection criteria, the top management, and the socialization, and then you have the organizational culture. So this is how the culture is formed. Generally, the founders, they start with the culture, which will be carried forward by the management and by the people who are working. Okay, and then that becomes the culture of the organization. So, what are the key elements of a strong and positive organizational culture? It can be the vision and values. So, what is organizational culture? It is a set of shared values, beliefs, norms. It can be artifacts and practices that shape how employees interact, communicate, and collaborate with each other and with external stakeholders. So, what is a vision and value? A clear and compelling vision. Okay, after 5 years, after 10 years, how do you want to be? Where do you want to be? Is a vision. And this has to be set with the core values because these are the strong and foundations. These are the values, are the foundations of an organization. So they try to provide a common direction, a purpose for the employees, and which will actually help them in decision making and behavior. And norms. What are norms? Norms are unwritten rules of behavior, the rules of the game. So these are informal guidelines on how to behave. So norms tell people what they are supposed to be doing, saying, believing, and even wearing. Okay, so they are never expressed in writing, but they would be the policies or the procedures which are passed on by word of mouth and or by the behavior, and these should be enforced. Okay, work hard, play hard, come in early, stay late, look busy at all times, look relaxed at all times. So these are all the norms. And what are artifacts? Artifacts are the visible and intangible tangible aspects of an organization that people hear or say or feel. Okay, so these can be such things as the working environment, the tone, the language used in letters, or the manner in which people address. Okay, and then would be the trust and the transparency. So, how transparent, how open you are, that really builds in the trust. And the diversity and inclusion, the key elements for the strong and positive organizational culture. So the diversity, regardless of their backgrounds, identities, perspectives, and experiences, you try to include the people. And then you have the engagement and recognition, which will actually boost the motivation of the employees, the learning and development of the culture, and the wellness and balance. It can be the people orientation or task orientation, centralized, decentralized, safety, risk, cooperation, competition. So all these are the basic frameworks on which the culture is formed. So what are the best practices of the organizational culture? So the best practices refers to certain stage of practices that some companies are known. So Amazon is world's number one online shopping platform. So employees respond to the culture of the organization in a very positive way. They think that working at Amazon gives them a unique insight into the world of software development, and that one would very rarely get such kind of an opportunity. Similarly, Uber's culture is aggressive and unrestrained. Netflix is one of the best places to work. Okay. And you have Reliance Industries, and then you have TCS, and you have Wipro. So many examples are there. Each one of them have their unique culture, which can be having a long-lasting impact on the employee performance. And training in internalizing organizational culture. So there are various levels and timings by which the members of the organization can be trained. It can be the induction program. So whenever a person is selected and placed in the organization. So before he is actually placed in his required set of job, an induction program will be organized. And generally, the head of the department or the manager or the senior manager or sometimes the CEO or the managing director of the company, they address the newly recruited employees, giving uh, explaining or expressing the view of the organizational culture. It can be the history, the vision, the mission, okay, and the kind of culture what they follow in the organizations. And also the periodic training programs. Sometimes you're working in an organization for 20 years or more than 15 years, you tend to forget the culture. So you need to have periodic training programs wherein you try to build skills, knowledge, and attitudes along with the new employees, also with the existing employees. Outbound training programs, OBT programs, can be conducted wherein the employees can be taken in batches outside the organization, far from their routine work, factory, or company locations, and in the open environment where you try to have a clear vision about the company as well as the employees. And the management development programs, which will actually help in learning uh, the new things or the new views which are basically being developed. And a constant development program will always help the employees to stay ahead in the company's, or it can be where he's dealing with certain employees that will really help him to cope himself in meeting the changing in the changing scenario or the environments where the employees, when they make mistakes, or any issue relating to the productivity, they get the a proper follow-up action whenever such kind of programs are organized. And what is organizational climate? Organizational climate is when we see the definition, It defines organizational climate as a set of attributes specific to a particular organization that may be induced from the way that organization deal with its members and its environment. So it is referred as a set of attributes which can be perceived about a particular organization, and it can also be defining it as its subsystems that may be induced from the way that the organization and their members uh, act within that environment. So why is organizational climate important? It represents the personality of an organization. It encompasses the array of situational demands and opportunities which are present in the work environment. So the organizational dimensions such as structure, system, culture, leadership, behavior, employee needs, all these have an impact on the organization. What are the dimensions of organizational culture? Litwin and Stringer, they are the pioneers in giving the definition towards the organizational culture, and they have explained climate using 6 factors. So it can be the organization structure, the perception of the extent to the organizational constraints, the rules and the regulations which are there in the organization. It can be the individual responsibility, that is feeling of autonomy of being one's own boss, the reward system, feeling related to being confident or adequate, and then the risk taking. So the perception of the degree of challenge they take in the work situations. It can be the warmth and support, the feelings of general helplessness prevailing in work settings. It can be the tolerance and the conflict, the degree of confidence and the climate. So these are the things what they have given as dimensions for the organizational climate. So Baldev R. Sharma has given 9 dimensions, that is the scope for advancement, the way the grievance is handled, the kind of monetary benefits provided, the perquisites and the allowances and the salaries which are provided to the employees, participative management, where the employees are encouraged to participate in the decision making. And it can be the objectivity, it can be the recognition and the appreciation what they are getting while performing their work, the safety and security, the welfare facilities, what the organization is providing, and the training and education what they are getting. So, what is the difference between the culture and climate? Organization culture is a macro phenomenon which refers to the patterns of beliefs, assumptions, values, and behaviors which are generally reflected uh, the commonality in people working together. Whereas the organizational climate is a micro phenomenon, and it reflects how employees in an organization perceive about the characteristics of the organization, the departments, the subsystems, the units, so on and so forth. So that is the basic difference between the organizational climate and culture. And there's a model of the organizational climate, and it has the antecedents, climate per se, the first level consequences, and the second level consequences. So when we are talking about the antecedents, we have the managerial characteristics and the organizational structure. The climate per se, it all depends upon the welfare, the grievance, the monetary benefits, the recognition. And what are the first level consequences? You have a very good interpersonal relationships. The job involvement of the employees will be very high. The performance would be very high. And what would be the second level consequences where the service quality of the customer engagement, the effectiveness, and the employee attrition, all these things can be observed as an outcomes at the second level. Okay, and these actually determine the success of the organization. And then you have the organizational climate and morale. So this we are going to continue in tomorrow's session. Any doubts?